Good afternoon. My name is Brian Gregory. I'm the president of Aldridge, and I'm excited to have you all here today with us. So we want to make sure that we have a good discussion about what's impacting you in the construction industry specific. The last couple of events we had were general and broad about what's happening in the economy as a whole and how people are using technology to overcome that. But we want to have some specific discussion around what's going on in the construction industry. And so we've invited Pat Kiley to join us. He's the founder of Kiley Literary Legacies. Tom Webb, the vice president of strategy at HCSS. Jennifer Mayhew again with Doeren Mayhew, and Chad Hyatt, who is our chief information officer. So I'll just go around the room real quick for you all to introduce yourselves a little more, talk a little bit about your organization and the clients that you work with. Jennifer, let me start with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Doeren and what your role is there?
Okay. I'm with Doeren Mayhew, and I also do some work with our Capital Advisors affiliate and run that. We're a top 100 CPA firm. We basically closely help business owners grow, develop, achieve their goals, eventually exit if that transition happens. And I run our consulting practice in our investment bank. So we work with a lot of companies in a lot of industries, but we definitely have a very heavy niche in the construction space, and excited to be here today.
Good. Pat?
I'm Pat Kiley with Kiley Literary Legacies. Prior to that, I ran the AGC for 20 years and then spent 15 years in the consulting business, the last 3 with FMI. I retired from there in May of this year, and we write and speak about the industry, particularly company histories and current topics, also facilitate a few roundtables of commercial general contractors. I'm more involved on the commercial side of the business.
Great.
And my name's Tom Webb. I'm with HCSS. HCSS is a software company. We write software for heavy highway construction companies. So about 4,000 customers across North America use HCSS's products every day in their estimating and operations and fleet. But I'm our vice president in charge of strategy. I'm in charge of our product portfolio, and really happy to be able to talk to y'all today.
Great. And last, certainly not least, Chad.
Hi, I'm Chad Hyatt. I'm the Chief Information Officer here with Aldridge. We are an IT outsourcing group, and we work with small and medium businesses providing their complete IT stack, all the way from the service desk, the people that answer the phone and help you get unstuck when you're stuck on your computer, all the way up to architectural design and road mapping, thinking about what's next. How are we going to align what the business is trying to accomplish to what the technology tools necessary to make that happen are going to be. And I get to work both within Aldridge from a technology perspective on laying out what's going to be next, but I also get to work with a large number of our clients in an architectural consulting capacity. So I get to work with a lot of different industries, including the construction industry.
So I'd like to start with Pat and give us just an overview of the economics that are going on right now in the construction industry and what the outlook looks like right now.
Well, thank you, Brian, and certainly thanks to the whole Aldridge village that it took to get me into the virtual world, specifically Selena. And thanks to all of you for letting me be part of a discussion of the future. What we're going to talk about today is certainly elements of that. We are about ankle to calf deep in what will be ultimately disruptive change to the industry in the basic model of how we build. And a lot of what's discussed today will be elements of our new world. I'd last like to say this would be a very different conversation today if it wasn't for Jerry Nevlin and people like him at the AGC and other trade associations that were able to get the construction industry declared an essential industry. And as a result of that, this is not a particularly discouraging picture. We started on a very good note. The Houston market was at an all-time high, 35.5 billion, driven a little bit by a $9 billion allocation to heavy highway for infrastructure related situations. It was also very good that Dallas was 39.5 and San Antonio, Austin over 25. So Texas contractors had $100 billion worth of work in just the major Texas markets. In addition to that, the U.S. construction, and this is construction to be put in place, was 1.19 trillion. So we went into this with a good head of steam. In talking anecdotally only, here in Texas, in the commercial side at least, it seems like about 10% of that volume has either been delayed or a bit of it canceled. But it depends upon the type of funding, whether it went forward or not. Lots of the projects that are funded by government sources may have some trouble next year, but those funds are allocated for this year. So we've got a pretty good situation. By the end of the year, a few more may be impacted, but we can live with this. And it appears that we in Texas probably have a better picture by 10 or 15% than they do nationally. The question in these contractors' mind is what is going to be in planning that still goes forward. There is some incentive in that you can borrow money right now cheaper than you've been able to do in a long time. So that's an optimistic. It's not that we're not without pain in the Houston economy. In March and April, we lost 350,000 jobs, and 130,000 of those have been regained. If you compared March through May of 2019 to March through May of 2020, retail sales were off by 66%. But June over June, we're back to even. So that looks like a pretty decent situation. I'd mention a couple of markets that are in change. One is general purpose office space driven by energy. The energy business does not need as many people. From peak to trough, 2014 to 2016, Houston lost 78,000 Houston-based jobs. Since 2016, we've gained back only 40,000 of those. So the energy business is changing a little bit on the negative side from construction. Conversely, the medical business, not only are we getting older as baby boomers, some of you that are still there, but also the fact that we now have a real effort to have one of the great biopharma research complexes in the world. And TMC3 is getting underway. It's definitely a go. So that'll replace a number of those good jobs that we're losing in energy. A couple of last things. When we get through this, and we will, the history of the industry is we've had 5 things, at least as bad as this, that we've come out swinging from. That Ray Perryman, the kind of guru of Texas in terms of economy, says that by 2045, Houston will move from its current 650 billion GDP to about 1.15 trillion. And if you get a GDP number, take 5% of it, and that'll be the minimum of construction put in place. That positive picture is for all of Texas. So as restaurateur Jim Good put on his pie boxes, you might give some serious thought to thanking your lucky star you live in Texas. It's a decent picture once we get through.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. Jennifer, let me shift to you. Pat gave us a good overall economic overview there. Talk a little bit about the near term and the discussions you're having specifically with your clients as to how do they navigate this? What do they look for? How do they make sure that they're reacting appropriately?
Yeah. And, what we're seeing with a lot of our clients is obviously just a lot of uncertainty, right? Everyone had a backlog they went into the year with. Things were busy, and I don't disagree with you, Pat, at all. Anecdotally, my guess would be about 10 to 15% of projects shifted. Now, I do think it's some of the bigger dollar ones, so depending on the size of the company, that can have a bigger or smaller impact. So a lot of them were worried about staffing levels, how many people they had. The PPP funds kind of delayed those decisions, but for companies that were essential businesses, those funds have been spent. And construction was an essential business throughout this time in Texas. So now everyone's kind of trying to look ahead. And you know, a lot of our clients are pulling out their 0809 playbooks and just saying, okay, here's what happened then. How do I look at it now? And so what's really key to that, and I think why what we're talking about today is so important, is really having fairly dynamic systems where you can look ahead at your forward reporting and backlog and sales and where it's going to hit, so that you know, hey, can I afford to do something differently or cheap to fill in a gap? And how do I price things? When am I going to be busy? How many people should I have going forward? And we're seeing a lot of that just in the, you know, some of the quoting slowing down a little bit, some of the bidding slowing down. Now money's still cheap, so I think there'll still be stuff going on, but you know, trying to plan that gap and make sure you don't lose money in that gap and can get those people back. And so having systems that speak to that are pretty critical. And then the systems, I think, became even more important when a lot of companies said, okay, we're essential, that's great, we got our guys in the field, we're having to do a bunch of safety stuff for them, let's try to scale back the office. And so, you know, you had people coming in shifts in those areas, more people working from home, which now gets into the whole communication effect of that.
Sure.
You know, office field communication and how that works when the office people aren't even in the office.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue to Tom. Let's go to you. Just talking from a technology point of view, what are you seeing from your client base to what are their challenges, and what's the rest of this year look like?
Yeah, that's a good, it is a good segue into it. And thank you, Brian, for inviting me to be on this panel. So I would say from our customers, when I talk to our customers, typically I find two things to be true. One is they spent a lot of the early part of March scrambling technologically. They were trying to figure out what to do and actually get things solved quickly, because the world as it existed one day was a completely different world the next day. And so ultimately that scramble produced a lot of things that they just had to Band-Aid and duct tape to get working in certain ways. And then the second thing that I'm finding to be true is now they're many of them are taking a step back and saying to themselves, okay, I made all these changes, so some of them are going to be temporary changes, and other ones I need to make permanent changes. And like putting your mind to what are those things that I want to make permanent changes is really the task that I'm running into a lot today when I talk to our customers. And a couple of things that I view most of the people I talk to reconciling in their mind as far as permanent changes. One is the move to take the field paperless. And it kind of goes to what Jennifer is saying. You know, almost every contractor I know that wasn't already paperless, what they most struggled with was the information that the office needed that the field had. It was hard to get from point A to point B when they were first trying to do this. And so they got something working, but now what can they do permanently? What's a permanent change in there? So that's kind of number one. The second thing that I see as a trend that is going to stick is the push to the cloud. So the cloud computing, getting information on the cloud, getting access on the cloud used to be a nicety a few months ago. It's pretty much a necessity now. And most people are viewing that as a necessity going forward as well.
Yeah, that certainly is a good segue. You're making my job easy today. To Chad. And Chad, I know we talked through a few topics to cover today, but one of the things that kind of came up in the meantime that I want to maybe start with is you attended the Microsoft Inspire event this week. And obviously there was a lot of communication there about cloud and what they're doing. You want to just give us an update as to, one, what that conference is, but then also what did you hear, what's coming down the pike?
Sure. Microsoft Inspire is Microsoft's global annual partner conference, and clearly they held it virtually this year for the first time ever. It was completely virtual. Microsoft, being a technology company, both had to respond to that need and present it virtually themselves, but they're also responding as a product company for the types of tools that they're putting out there. And there were really 4 key tenets that echo a lot of what we were talking about as we were getting prepared for this roundtable, in that the number one challenge that Microsoft is trying to help people solve today is enabling the remote workforce. You should be able to get to your information, your applications from anywhere, at any time, from any device. You should be able to work as a team, no matter where you are, from anywhere, from any device. because that's just the reality now. You can't just spin around in your chair and ask the person behind you for that piece of paper. You have to be able to get it somewhere. We're also seeing a lot of businesses having to deal with the reality of needing to downsize and control costs, but they also need to be able to manage the business volume. And so we're seeing a lot of tools coming out, especially in construction, especially across groups that are gathering so much information about how do you develop and automate your business processes. You don't have to be a programmer anymore to automate processes. If people can write an Excel formula, they're able to say, I need that number to flow over to this program. Those tools exist now. And we're also seeing more business insights coming in where I've got all these different piles of information. How can I make a business decision based on that? You need to compile that and create a business insight, a dashboard, something that shows you your flow through your organization so that you can actually make leadership decisions on it. And then the same way that you're having to stay connected internally, people are having to figure out new ways to stay connected with their customers. Where before you used to have a project meeting, you go out on site and have that project meeting. Now that needs to happen virtually. Well, they need the same type of information that you've got available. You've got plans, updates, photos, sketches, changes. Those things have to flow in the same sort of virtual environment that we're all working in. And lastly, underpinning this all is still this focus on security and continuity. When it was everybody in the same office, it was hard enough making sure that people kept all their accounts secure, their passwords secure, that no one's email was getting hacked. That problem is 3 times larger now that everybody's working from home. What are they accessing your systems from? Are they just using the home computer that the kids are using? I'm sure the kids follow the same software etiquette that you would. You wouldn't install things that you wouldn't expect. But are they tying into your office network from that home computer? How are they secured? How are they logging in? Do they just use the same password that they use on 3 other websites, and that's now the remote access to the emergency solution that you had to set up to work from home? Those are the types of things that we now have to take a step back and look at and say, how do we make these robust? How do we make them secure? And how do we make them scalable?
I might mention something I forgot to say earlier, and that is the fact that while our Houston picture is still pretty good, we can't forget that there are nearly 17 million people still on unemployment benefits that may or may not lose them in some form tonight. And this past week, the report came out this morning, 1.4 million people were new claims. That's up 100,000 from the last 2 weeks. So people get into a discussion of what the recovery is going to look like. And I don't think anybody has that picture anywhere near clear. People are speculating with interesting diagrams. One said it's going to be an upside down square root sign. Somebody's got too much time on their hands.
Yeah, a couple things I was going to mention and follow up to one thing that you said, Pat, and another one for Chad. But from what I hear in the infrastructure industry, so most of the infrastructure contractors in the country, if you're in the audience listening and you're an infrastructure contractor, you work for civil, you do civil work for municipalities or states. So their projects aren't really being canceled right now. But what they are seeing, what they're more concerned about than anything from an economic standpoint, is the fact that since sales tax revenues are down, what they're going to end up seeing is 2021, 2022, a reduction in projects in there. So so to kind of what you're picking up on what you were saying,
I heard a statistic the other day that in Texas, about 57% of the budget normally is sales tax revenue, and it had dropped down below 50% in collections, came back up. The same thing, though, is true on the outlook for Houston Purchasing Index. It was below 50. It was down to 40. It's back to 49.5 and projected to be 53 for the next 3 months. So there's mixed signals here, but the infrastructure situation is indefinite until the sales tax revenue stable.
Right. Yeah. And then Chad, what I was going to mention after you spoke is, so that's another thing that I hear a lot of when I talk to our customers, and that is we used to have a world where you were either using third-party IT or you had in-house IT. And if you had in-house IT, you quit using third-party IT. That world changed awful fast overnight, and it was security that was the issue. So if you have an internal IT department right now, you don't have third-party IT giving you advice on security, you're at a risk. I talked to one contractor who said they have had more security issues in the last 3 months than they did in the previous 3 years combined. So I mean, ultimately, that's where you've got to have a good partner from an IT perspective to help security.
I think that's true. And I'll tell you, the bad guys out there that have always been trying to compromise businesses and always try to get a little more information or get some financial gain at somebody else's pain have certainly redoubled their efforts. Now that everybody's working from home and they're already off balance, people are a lot less sensitive to maybe that's threatening, maybe that particular email is an email that I shouldn't respond to. I've had to respond to 3 other emergency emails. Maybe this isn't the one that I should put my email address and password on. I'll have to share to everybody in the audience the number one thing that you should be talking about within your organization from a security perspective is multi-factor authentication. Passwords are not secure, and especially when people are working from home, if all they're protected with is a password, all it takes is for them to give that password to the wrong person in the wrong email. And now that all your systems are accessible remotely, someone from the outside, that bad actor, is able to log into your environment as one of your employees with all their rights and privileges. And it's not so much what are you going to read in their email box that matters. It's now that bad actor is going to start sending out mail to your customers and to your vendors, acting with you and your authority and your business relationship. And maybe change routing numbers. Maybe just say, hey, here's that invoice. Could you route this to this new bank account? I've seen that happen in multiple environments, and we really have to pay attention to it in a mindset where we're all working remotely, and it's very hard to make sure that there's that level of trust that we had when we were in the office.
So, Chad, I know there's a lot going on with Office 365 right now, specifically with the way that they're changing up their pricing model and what's included and what's not included. And the new Microsoft 365 that's out that includes many of the security features that you used to have to buy a la carte. You want to talk a little bit about how users can take advantage of that and what they should be able to get now that they weren't able to get before without paying a large amount?
Sure, and the not paying a large amount is really a big deal in a lot of industries. I don't know how many of you out there are already subscribed to Microsoft for your email services for your company, but Microsoft has been taking a lot of the premium security features that they used to have as add-ons and rolling them into their base packages, just because security has been such a big deal with everybody working remotely. They've been collapsing things down to where you now have the auditing capabilities, the information control capabilities. Are people copying your files to places they shouldn't be copying? Those things are now included in some of the base products that are out there. And we're, as an IT provider, I probably get a little more excited about it. It's very product specific, but I'm also seeing what organizations are able to take advantage of. And when they leverage these things, it enables all the other tools towards automation and the business insights to be able to actually say, I can communicate with anybody in my organization at any time, and I've got a record of it, and I can have the information flow from point A to point B. All the things that Microsoft is bringing in that 365 stack are really coming to bear for these organizations that are having to adapt and figure out how we're going to work today.
Good. Jennifer, let me shift gears back to you, talking about organizations, how they're focused on cash flow. I know that that's something that obviously is top of mind for everyone. We were talking through a story of how you worked your client through that process. Talk a little bit about that and what were some of the aha moments they had as you were working through that exercise?
Yeah, because obviously cash is king, right? And and we know everyone's cash flow is slowing down a little bit when they're working remote or getting a hold of the right person to get paid. But what we've done with a lot of our clients is really walk through the whole construction process from, bid to I got the job to I did the job and now I'm going to get paid, and how it interfaces with the draw request. And so one of the biggest things that, a lot of contractors can do for their cash flow is really just focus on timing get their bills to know when they can get it in a subsequent draw request. And it's amazing how when you walk through that process, you know, everyone's kind of used to a monthly cycle, so they go monthly, but you know, if you can get your vendors to bill you through the 15th, and if the draw request is the 25th, you get that draw sheet. If you don't, you're waiting 30 days to even submit it, and then you're waiting 60 days to get paid. And I mean, that's a simple example of it, but when you walk through that whole process, you see two things. You see a cash gap from when, you know, I had to pay my employee's salary to when I could actually bill for it. But you also start to see too where the inefficiencies break down in a process and where the bottlenecks happen. And those are probably the things that have the biggest advantage for automation. One tiny thing I'll add to the cash flow process too, though, it's also that flow of information from the field into that back office so that they know about it so it can get billed, and treating invoicing with the same level of urgency as that always kind of has a different structure. But, you know, the more we can streamline that flow, a lot more effective it can be.
So what about, Tom, talking to you a little bit about the stuff that you're hearing from your clients, what they're doing that's innovative. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, so the biggest thing from a technology standpoint that I'm hearing from an innovation is how these how contractors are really looking at the fact that they've got technology as a way to differentiate in their and make themselves look different to their clients. You know, I was talking to a contractor the other day, and this was a good example that they when during this time when they had to actually go to their clients and say, hey, look, it's easy for us to make sure that our field people are being compliant with all the rules about COVID. This is how we use technology to do it. All of our people have iPads, and they get the COVID toolbox box on here, and they walk through it, and they show their customer exactly what they do, and they compare that in another contractor that just says, oh yeah, we've got it, trust us on the fact that we're COVID compliant. So what contractors are really waking up to that I talk to is the fact that they've used to look at technology and look at technology as just a way to get efficient. But now they can take technology, that same technology, and recast that as a way to look different with their customers and really turn that into a business development opportunity that they've got. And so that's something really that I'm seeing a really innovative contractors focus on, Brian.
Yeah. So Tom, what you're saying is like at what they actually need versus a Me Too software purchase, like my competitor bought this, so I got to buy it.
that is so many technology, Jennifer, you're exactly right. So many technology purchases that I see initially happen because, oh, you know, I compete with Chad, and I know Chad's pretty efficient, so I'm going to go get the software that he's going to get, because obviously it's the software that makes him efficient. But what they're figuring out is they can take that software and use it for different things, and it's really neat to see that creativity. I think when we look back at the March and April of 2020 timeframe, as crappy as it was for everybody, what we did see from a technology standpoint is a tremendous amount of creativity, a tremendous amount of innovation. And I think those that are actually looking at that, where that creativity and what they could be doing from a creativity standpoint, are jumping ahead of the competition right now.
That would be my observation, Tom, from listening, and certainly in a firm that functions nationally like FMI did, that there is a clear differentiation going on between those people that are going to be leaders in the next situation and those that are just going to do what the minimum they have to do to keep going as they're going.
Yeah.
And one extreme is that a Boston contractor, a multi-billion-dollar contractor, has 2 data scientists on board.
Yeah.
And so everything he's got gathers data, and that's not too hard to have today, is it? And he's got people analyzing it to see what might be done to gain a competitive advantage out of all of the data he's gathering. So we really see some interesting positions.
Yeah, it really is. It's a remarkable time in the construction industry, and then we haven't even talked about the fact that when you have these technologies, how you can use it to recruit better. So getting that top level talent, especially these younger emerging top talented people, when they have a choice between joining my company, which is not technologically forward, and so in your company, which is technologically forward, that's a win for you. And you're going to get that top level talent by looking at that. So there's so many reasons that are coming to the forefront now, rather than just I'm going to buy it because somebody else has it.
One of the things that I've seen a lot of companies start to take advantage of is pushing the technology out to the edge and getting in the hands of the people that are out in the field, more than just email and voice on their phones. I've seen companies set up just a simple form that you open with one tap on your mobile phone that says, hey, I'm going to report progress out here in the field from my personal perspective, and I'm going to attach a picture to it. And that automatically routes through an email or back through a Teams channel back to the guys in the office or to the project manager. Or I need to report that I'm going to be unavailable tomorrow, and here's why, and here's the detail, and have it route through the system. Those types of quick forms can take somebody that's comfortable with the technology but isn't a programmer a couple of days to put in place. And so companies are able to take something that says, wow, we need to get that information faster. They're able to figure out that's really important. Let's put Jim on that for 2 days. Jim, can you put this together? You like working with these things. Here are the tools, and we've got a resource that's going to advise you on how to do it. Go for it. And in 2 days, great, we've got something. We can put that to use, and we can go through levels of refinement. Innovation doesn't have to be this big monolithic thing that you have to accomplish the world in one move. You can start with the small pieces that make you more efficient and improve the way that you're interacting with your customers and the way that you're interacting as a team.
Chad,
Yeah.
Looking at the lessons learned so far, I mean, it's been a very interesting year to say the least. Anything that stands out as a true lesson learned that you've seen from one of your clients, or just technology in general, what we've learned and how that's going to have an impact on the go forward here?
Don't count on your office being available. We're already here in Houston. We're already used to hurricane season. We're used to inclement weather and so forth. But if you still have your information systems, if you still have your information flow, your paper locked up within the four walls of your building, you've probably had a pretty tough time over the past 3 months, and you've had to make some significant changes or accommodations to your workflow. Maybe you still have to have people coming into the office to keep things moving. And there are certain things that you've got to physically do. There's materials and equipment that you've got to physically handle. But for the business processes, what's the next step? How can you move away from that? And so I've seen client organizations that went into this thinking, okay, yeah, we can work from home. We've got computers, but they've never really thought about how they're going to do it. Or they thought about, yeah, I can run that software from home, but they haven't thought about what's the experience like if you run it from outside the walls. Is it going to run the same way? And there are answers to all of this. I mean, technology is pretty cool. We can do lots of neat things for what the business actually needs. But these things, now that we're through this Band-Aid approach to getting things moving, we've got a lot of clients that are now having the conversation, okay, we've proven it can work. Let's make it better. Let's make this part of our new normal. And we're going to do a rotating shift in the office, and we need people to be able to work from anywhere at any time.
I think there's a cultural issue that is going on here, and people with very good cultures still have an element of that you have to be present, that this is an industry that must do its work present. Certainly that's true at the job site, but it is all these other issues. I think there will be a significant breakthrough, if that's the correct word, when people realize they're getting very good work done from home by people. It may not be done between 7 and 5 where I can see if Pat's over there, but by the same token, we're going to get the deliverables that we're getting in the office and maybe more. And that's been certain people's experience already in the 60 days or so we've been in the middle of this. They're getting the productivity they were worried about up front. They're getting very good work, undistracted work in certain cases. So it's kind of nice to see that occurring too.
And I think that'll lead to a more of a, metrics around productivity versus presence, for lack of a better word, that, okay, how much did you accomplish at home versus how many hours did you put in, or what'd you work on? And
yeah, I think that's a really good topic, and I'll I'll start with you, Jennifer, but I'll kind of go around the room a little bit, talking about the work from home and measuring productivity. What are you seeing, or what are you guys doing internally that you're able to judge that? Because we ourselves, we've been a very in the office culture, and when we have meetings, they're face to face. And when we're working with our clients, we're working in an area where everyone can see each other. You can pop your head up and ask someone else a question, and this is obviously changing all of that. And it's forcing us, and I think for the better, to make sure that we're looking at the things that really matter and making sure that we're using that to judge productivity. What are you guys doing, or what are you seeing from your clients in that regard?
Yeah, well, I know like one we kind of talked about when we were, preparing for this even was looking at like estimating, right? Like you say you have all your estimators out of the office and you say, well, how many jobs did this guy estimate today? Well, that could be a good metric, right, on its own. Like this guy did 10, this guy did 2. But what if the guy that did 2 did the 2 biggest jobs that you're going to do this year, and the guy that did 10 did a bunch of little ones? So then do you create a countermeasure of, okay, so how many dollars of revenue did they also estimate? And then what, and what targeted profit margin too, because if you compensate them on dollars, they're going to overprice everything and you're not going to get it. So you got to kind of think through, okay, if I'm going to measure productivity, how am I going to measure it, longer term? But what I found has been, and this is more across industries, not just, is really kind of focusing the smaller teams on, okay, what are the top 5 things we're going to get done as a team this week? And then you start your individual list too. And I found that to be very effective in this work from home. Now, what it's also led to is what I'm going to call the crazy Friday, where everyone had this stuff they wanted to get done this week. So now all of a sudden Friday, everyone urgently needs to speak with you. And I've noticed this across a lot of companies too. It happens in our firm. It happens with some of my clients. And, we've all talked about how these Fridays are like this day of never ending phone calls, because it turned into this is what I had to get done this week. So this is, so I got to talk to you before the end of the week. But I think those are tools that are working. Maybe I'm going to shift my week to Monday so I can hit it. But.
Good. Tom, I'll shift to you. I know you guys run a very process-driven organization yourself, and I'm sure this has had an impact on the way you operate. Anything you would like to share as to what changes you've made internally, or anything you've observed in your clients?
Yeah, in general, we've seen what Pat was describing, which is productivity has been fine. And when I talk to construction contractors, I hear the same thing, that I was surprised, and they've all been surprised that when people have been working from home, productivity hasn't dropped a lick. And that's been true for a software company and for the construction companies. But what I hear from them and what we experience is actually very similar in what the gap is too, which is when you're not in person, like, you have to be that much more diligent about doing things like career counseling with your employees and setting up time to actually work with them. Just because they're working from home doesn't mean they're less concerned about their careers. And so that's been the challenge that I've heard from our contractors more often than not, and that we've experienced within HCSS, which is, how do we then take that one-on-one coaching time and do that remotely, and do it efficiently remotely, because people have different schedules, especially those who are at home with kids. They may be trying to work early in the morning and late at night, and fit the day in the middle of the day to be there for their kids and their kids' education. So to trying to balance all that is really the tough part that we've heard a lot of, Brian.
Chad, I know you talked about MFA and some general security things that all organizations should be doing, but specifically with working from home right now, obviously it's top of mind, or it should be top of mind if it's not. What else can companies do to better protect themselves right now?
Well, I think companies really need to think about what information have they opened up too far in order to accommodate working from home. I've had a number of client organizations that weren't necessarily as prepared for working from home, so they took some pretty drastic measures to get anything to be able to continue working from home or get business working. And now it's time to take another look at that and say, do we really need everybody to have access to this, or did we inadvertently give the world access to this when we only intended to give ourselves access to it. It's a good time to go through and say, do we still have the accounts from employees who were maybe with us last year but aren't with us now? Are those still enabled? Are those valid logins in the environment? And who's watching it? Who's minding the store? Who's checking to make sure that only the things that are legitimate are occurring within the systems? What information could be flowing in or even out of the organization, but you may not necessarily be as aware of it right now because you're not in the office. There's not that same level of visibility. The same way that organizations are having to be more purposeful in their approach with managing remote workforces, they have to be more purposeful with managing their access to their information in their systems so that they've got an awareness of it beyond just the walls of the building.
Very good. Tom, I'll go back to you a little bit. So with your platform and the clients that you're working with, what's their biggest technology concern right now? I know security is always one of those things that's up there, but anything else standing out from your clients or your client base there that's just top of mind?
Yeah, I would say there's two of them. One is in general security, like you said, security is a big hot topic. And just kind of piggybacking onto what Chad said, I had a conversation with a contractor about 5 or 6 weeks ago about a security issue they were running into. And luckily they got some advice from somebody and fixed it. But then a couple weeks later, I just called to follow up on it, and it was another security issue, a completely different security issue, which then led me into the conversation of, hey, the problem isn't these security issues. The problem is there's so many security issues, you can't manage that on your own anymore. You've got to actually get some expertise. And so just to kind of reiterate what Chad said, like now's the time I think you really have to look for that trusted advisor that can come in as your security expert and actually help you in that situation. So security is a big one. And then for us, what we hear a lot of is the field. The field has been the overlooked part of a technology solution for years for many contractors. Many contractors had the old school mentality of, oh, well, they don't like technology and they're not going to use technology, so I'm not going to give them technology. And that has changed. Most of the field people that we talk to, whether it's foremen in the field, superintendents in the field, when you can give them their plan sets on an iPad, when you can give them an iPad to collect their time cards or an iPad that actually helps them from a safety perspective do their JHAs, like they actually appreciate that. And what contractors are finding now is that those are really tangible ways they can make themselves more efficient. And they can collect data that's right in the first place, and they can help out these people that are generally overworked within their companies.
Yeah.
A lot of times companies, once they get those sorts of tools deployed out to their teams, the teams actually feel appreciated. They're looking at it and it changes a lot of the perception of the organization. Like, wow, we use technology. We're using these tools. It's making my life easier. I don't have to do this, this, and this anymore. I can do this. And it gets done what I need to get done, and it reports it back that it's done. So we've got that accountability, that purposefulness.
Yeah. I would say, Brian, that I have seen some very powerful pairings between muddy boots field superintendents and young technical people, and they feed off each other. And the pride, when I've done some of these interviews in the histories, a 35 or 40-year field superintendent wants to tell me as part of the interview about how he can do all this on his computer now or on his phone. So it is a wonderful thing that goes on. And I think the other thing I'd say that all of this really is going to come down to test the culture of the company. If it's a character-based culture, it will get through this. And the issues of the trust will be there to begin with and then be validated by the help of the technology folks that come in like you all to help them. But as Covey, I think, said, character is not developed in a crisis, it's demonstrated. And we're in that crisis. So it's interesting to see.
Well, and I think what has so much power around all this, right, is if that communication flows correctly and flows through systems correctly, so the price was the same, the timing was the same, everything matches, you know, and then you get into cloud-based accounting systems and those things, you can move that data through, and now your accounting and finance teams are spending their time on what are the exceptions and how do we fix them versus what's the routine.
Right.
That's huge, and that's how you make and save money and improve processes and get better.
I think there's a genuine concern about keeping as many people employed as possible. There's always a point in that where you jeopardize many in this situation, but there's a genuine concern about people that don't make what others in the company do, how they get through this kind of a crisis. And I've seen this in several situations where the people taking the cut because of the trust-based culture are the top side. They'll give up to make sure the others can have. Pretty neat to watch.
So we talked a lot about technologies that are out there, and a lot of the things we've touched on today don't have a significant price tag on them. But there are things in an organization that they do need to implement that do have a significant price tag. Jennifer, how do you navigate those conversations to understand, is this just a fun toy that we want to buy that's not really going to have that big of an impact on the technology or on the organization overall? Or is this something that's mission critical? How does an organization go about thinking through that to make sure that it's a good investment for them?
Yeah, well, and I think a lot of that's thinking through where are their pain points in their process, and then saying, okay, I want to fix that versus and I'll use the Me Too example I gave earlier, right? But you know, I mean, what, 10, 15 years ago, it was everyone was buying GPS for every truck, right? And then no one ever read anything that came out through that, right? It was, yeah, I got it, and I'd use it if there was a problem, but I didn't use it for any meaningful information. And that's not the same anymore. So I think that's where, how you avoid that. I bought this software that was supposed to do this for me and it didn't work, is really thinking through before you make that purchase. Okay, what am I trying to fix? Will this fix it or not? And then what's my path to get there? Because if you just buy software to band-aid over a problem, it's probably not going to fix it because you don't know really what your real problem was.
Chad, anything to add to that? I know that goes hand in hand with a lot of the conversations that you have as well. Any other advice to how do you make that decision, whether it's just something we really need or is this something we just want for whatever reason?
I think Jennifer said it great. You have to start these conversations with understanding what your requirements are. What's success look like? What's the finish line? And it's never just, I want this shiny object because A, B, and C have this shiny object, and therefore I need to have this same piece of software. It's much more of the conversation of what do we actually need to solve to get there, and go into it with open eyes and realize maybe a quarter of your cost. Really, it's going to be your investment within your team, within your process, within your culture to say, we're going to achieve this. This is the tool or one of the tools that we are bringing to bear to achieve it. And we're going to invest ongoing team effort. We're going to put metrics around its success. We're going to measure our progress to get to that finish line so that we realize it's going to be hard, but X number of months down the road, whatever's appropriate for that piece of software, that tool that we're implementing, we can look back and say, we're here and we achieved what we said we were going to achieve because we went into it with our eyes open. We allocated the appropriate resources. We put our organization focused on this and making it successful.
Very good. Well, we'll wrap with one more question, and that's just looking at the rest of 2020, and let's just take this around the room. What's the number one thing that an organization right now should focus on to make sure that they're set up for the most success in 2021 and forward? And Jennifer, I'll start with you.
I would say, in case we are returning to an 08-09 state, our clients that managed through that successfully and did very well and came out on the other side as leaders were the ones that had a forward-looking budget and forecast. And it wasn't just to have that as a tool in and of itself. It was because when things changed, we could look at it and say, all right, your sales are down this much. We got to cut out this much of costs. and let's talk about where that should be, you know, and where you're making money and where you're not making money. If you don't have that information, you can't make those decisions, and you definitely can't make them fast enough, because I think we've all seen, right, you know, you cut a cost, you still have that cost for a month or two. So you've really got to be ahead of that. And so, you know, I think just with all the uncertainty in the world right now, having that as a tool to make those decisions is critically important.
Chad, how about you?
I was going to say the exact same thing. You need metrics and you need the information in front of you to be able to make appropriate guidance decisions and set your forecast, set your compass. Know where you're going to be so that, or know where you are planning to be, and now you can make the appropriate steps and the appropriate decisions on how you're going to get there. It's not something that you can necessarily be as reactive as some organizations may have been. It takes a much more methodical approach, a much more purposeful approach. I've used the word a couple of times here today. Really taking the data that you've got right now that's already both in the culture of the people that you have within the organization, but also the little bits of data that reflect the workflow, the health of the organization, whether it's the financial dollars or just the number of bids and estimates that are going out, or the number of projects that are coming through, or the time that it takes to process. Looking at that, putting metrics around it so that you can actually daylight it and make management decisions upon it is going to be the next big thing.
Tom, how about you?
I would say now is the time for you to engage your emerging leaders. That's the biggest thing I would recommend is when you're looking at a economy that you're going to have to work hard to get your way through. If you're looking at a future you're going to have to work hard to get your way through. You know, ultimately, don't try to put all that on your shoulders. Get your emerging leaders involved. This is what will actually help them develop in their career, and that's the big thing I would recommend to people.
Very good. And Pat, anything else to add?
I would just say this is the time when, if you've got a true north in the company, like everybody that really has a good culture has, be sure you're sailing right towards that and not compromising in any way. Where I see the real leaders by any metric you want to give that run good-sized, multi-generational companies, where they are is out on the job site, thanking their people for working, staying in touch with the people, at the same time, looking strategically at what the markets of the future that will have funding will be. The question becomes, where do I replace my backlog? That's a real hard business question to ask. And so if it requires new markets, we're going to figure, you know, what does it take to win in that market? Can we deliver that value proposition? So the fundamentals of the business have to happen and ratchet up the contact and the alignment with the culture behaviors. That's what I see.
Very good. Well, I thank you all for your time. Thank you for bearing through my technology issues with audio, but luckily I dialed in on my cell phone and we had a backup plan. So appreciate that. Thank you all for joining. We're going to follow this up with a survey of what you liked about the panel, what could have gone better, and what you'd like to hear from us in the future. Please take a few minutes to answer that as we look forward through the rest of 2020 and even into next year. I think it's going to be a while before we have major events where we're able to talk live like this. So we're going to be doing some more panel events. And so we just want to make sure that we're bringing you the content that's most important. So please feel free to give us any of that feedback. And again, thank you all as panelists for being here and joining us with this good discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.